28 Years Later is directed by Danny Boyle and is the third installment in the 28 Days Later series, ironically released 23 years after the original movie. This movie had inexplicably one of the best trailers of 2025, so I was very curious how this movie would turn out. Now, before I saw the new film, I decided to get caught up on the previous two, so real quickly, let me go over what I thought of those. Starting with 28 Days Later, released in 2002. This movie takes place in a post-apocalyptic England after a deadly rage virus has spread throughout the world and turned almost everyone into angry, bloodthirsty zombies. Our lead character, played by Cillian Murphy, wakes up in the middle of all this and gets taken in by two other survivors. They have to teach him the ropes of survival and traverse this hellscape to find other non-infected people or die trying. I really loved about 85% of this movie. That's not to say that the other 15% is terrible or ruined it, but it did kind of leave a bad taste in my mouth for what was otherwise a really damn good movie. One of the things that every zombie movie has to get right is the atmosphere, and this movie really uses its low budget to its advantage. The movie was made for about £5 million or $8 million, and it was shot on digital videotape. This gives the movie a very grimy and grungy look, and it fits so well, matched with the really dynamic cinematography and creative editing, the eerie score, not to mention the infected being genuinely threatening, and this is a beautifully grim world. But I do like that there are brief moments of levity, and the characters do get to just relax for a while. Of course, this only exists to disarm the audience for the emotional gut punch that happens later, but it's effective. The cast across the board is incredible, with this being, for many of them, their first mainstream role. Cillian Murphy, Naomi Harris, Brendan Gleeson, they all do great. Honestly, I was riding a 4.5 for this movie until the last 35 to 40 minutes, where it starts to kind of lose itself. Spoilers in case you haven't seen it, but after Brendan Gleeson dies, the group gets picked up by this group of soldiers led by Christopher Eccleston. They've been chasing this signal that they sent out looking for more survivors, and because they claim to have the key to beating the infection. But when they get to their compound, it turns out that the key is forcefully breeding with Selena and Hannah. And, well, I guess now I know what Alex Garland's contribution to the script was.
Hey, sweetheart, how'd you like to take a ride in a real
Army general?
She's 16!
This just seems so unnecessary and creepy for no reason. And I know that they're the bad guys and that this is all to further the movie's themes of man being the real infection, but we kind of already got that from the opening. It didn't need to get this needlessly rapey to get that point across. But it wasn't just that aspect that lost me. This finale in general is kind of a mess. There were a lot of painful lapses in logic. When they show that they have one of the infected chained up in the backyard, my first thought was, well, can't wait to see how this bites you in the ass later. And I don't know, it was just kind of a lackluster ending to an otherwise great movie. And in no way does it weaken the rest of the film. Everything else is just that good. If you haven't checked it out yet, definitely do so. I'd give it a 4 out of 5. Now, imagine that all the problems that I had with the ending of 28 Days were present throughout the entirety of that movie. And you have 28 Weeks Later, released in 2007. This movie genuinely got worse the longer it kept going. The movie takes place, naturally, 28 weeks after the outbreak, where we seem to have beat it and are starting to let civilians back into London. But through a series of absolutely brain-dead oversight, the infection makes its way back into the city and all hell breaks loose. Before I talk about the bad, let me real quickly talk about the good. The movie is being carried by its acting and its score. I saw a review on Letterboxd that said the score for this movie could be played over someone taking a shit and it would still go incredibly hard. And while it does get slightly overplayed, it's still very effective at being moody and atmospheric. Second, the actors are all trying their hardest. Yeah, there's an occasional off delivery, but for the most part, everyone does it pretty well and they play up the emotion very nicely. Everything else about the movie ranged from boring to aggravating. Again, you could make the argument that the incompetence of the US Army and everyone involved in containing the infection is intentional, and considering our track record with deadly diseases, it's a very valid and apt observation. But even still, you'd think that they'd be able to stop 2 kids from going outside the safe zone and a guy getting into a containment cell to make out with his infected wife. Every single character in this movie feels like they're set to 2% intelligence solely so the plot can happen. And half of the characters are just assholes who are impossible to root for. The story is clunky, I didn't know what the hell was going on, and the movie didn't really do enough to get me to care. About half of the visuals are pretty solid, but the rest look like garbage. I don't know how a movie made 5 years before, made with half the budget, looks better, but it really does. That helicopter kill looked straight out of the asylum. Ultimately, this just didn't have the same weight that the first one had. I honestly don't blame them for quietly decanonizing this movie in favor of Years. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen, but it was a massive step down compared to the first. I'd give it a 2.5 out of 5. And finally, we've reached 28 years later. I'll go ahead and issue a spoiler warning right up front. I feel like the movie's been out long enough to where I can talk more openly about it, but just in case, if you haven't seen it and don't want it ruined, this is your chance to click off. Like I said at the start, this movie's trailer took pretty much everyone by surprise. With its eerie tone and Rudyard Kipling poem in the background, it sure as hell got my attention before I'd even seen the other two movies. So I was very interested going in, but in the back of my head I thought, there's no way the actual movie will be as good as the trailer, right? And yet, somehow, they did it. Not only was this an awesome movie, but personally, I think I might like it better than the original. I will say, speaking of the trailer, it is a tad misleading as to what the actual movie is, but in a good way. The trailer makes it look like this intense father-son road trip movie with Aaron Taylor Johnson, and to an extent, it is for the first 25 minutes or so. Then the father takes a back seat, and the story pushes the son, played by Alfie Williams, into the focus as he travels to the mainland with his mom, played by Jodie Comer, to find out what's wrong with her and hopefully find a cure. I can see how that would have pissed a lot of people off, but honestly, I thought it was refreshing and brought a bit more emotion back into the series. There's been a bit of a running theme with movies this year, talking about confronting death and coming to terms with one's own mortality. This one may have a bit more of a pessimistic view and outcome, but I thought it was effective and made for a very gut-wrenching final act. I thought the cast carried this movie so well. Aaron Taylor Johnson and Jodie Comer do great, but the standout is Alfie Williams. He is fucking fantastic. I was honestly surprised to see that this was his first movie. I hope this is the start of a prospering acting career for him, because he was incredible. Ralph Fiennes is also in the movie, and while he shows up way too late, I thought he gave a great performance, and I'm excited to see more of him in the sequel. While the movie is definitely a slow burn emotional drama, it still has its fair share of zombie action, and it's pretty awesome. The makeup and effects look great, although it's fitting that Aaron Taylor Johnson is in this movie, because those deer look like they were pulled straight out of Craven. The look of the film is great too. It's very gritty, and the cinematography is really stylized. The editing with things like the kill shots were pretty cool, even if it might have been a tad overused. By the way, as much as I loved the movie, I won't say it's perfect either. There are a lot of elements that feel very much like setup for the sequel, and while they do a good job at getting me interested in the sequel, the movie should still stand on its own. While I wasn't ever bored by the movie, it did feel very slow and drawn out in certain parts. It is a horror movie, so of course there's going to be convenient lapses in logic, and that ending was a choice to say the least. I mean, I loved it. I appreciated how out of left field and over the top it was, and after the somberness of the scene prior, I like that they gave you something to make you laugh in the last few moments, but I can understand how people might not have gelled with it. Like I said, this was written mere days after my first viewing. Maybe after I sit with it for a while or rewatch it, the flaws will become more glaring and apparent, but at this moment in time, I thought the movie was great. I loved the story, the cast was phenomenal, it had enough horror movie action while still providing a lot of heart and drama. It was honestly better than I was expecting it to be, and I'm very curious to see how the sequel turns out. Going to my ranking, I have it as a 4.5 out of 5, but that may change upon rewatch.